Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of Sven and Phil Chats.
Fireside Chats.
I'm going to retitle it every
We need to have something over here like a fire or a.
We need an LED light.
An LED light.
Let's just not beat around the bush anymore. We need an LED light.
Could we go really old and like 70s and get like one of those lava lamps?
Yeah. Dude, that would be sick.
Hey?
That would be sick. I'd take a big lava lamp right here.
Yeah.
For everybody watching on video, you can, leave a comment how to improve the area. But really good to have you guys. We're excited to have another conversation. We're taking some time in the week to chat a bit about the messages and really kind of anything.
Anything that comes up,
just taking time to discuss and bring clarity. We're very happy that you could join us. We hope these conversations are helpful. If it's your first time here, my name is Phil, joined by Sven.
Yes, sir.
And we're at Revive Church and take this platform, Revive TV, to have conversations like these, but also to upload messages, testimonies, anything that could be helpful and value adding to the lives of our viewers and people in our church.
We hope that your workout is going well or your drive into work is a pleasant one.
Yeah.
But before we get into this deep word, how you think about Everton losing 10 points in the Premier League, the football league that we watch?
I feel like it's probably deserved for them. I would have to think that it is, but it is just very kind of hectic knowing all the other clubs that have been skirting the fringes. I also hope Liverpool are keen. Yeah, because I'm not silly enough to think that we just amazing. But there hasn't really been much like gossip or murmurs about Liverpool doing anything dodgy, but loads of stuff about kind of City and Chelsea. So. And I think United's revenue is just so big.
Yeah, they got such a massive fan base.
I think they just got the money that they use, but City and Chelsea's just inject. They
don't spend it on anything else like grounds or.
No, let it just be fair. Whatever happens to Everton, let it happen to other guys. But now the clubs that got relegated last season are wanting to sue Everton for big money because if Everton didn't cheat essentially, then they might not have been relegated.
No, I think that's petty. That's going too far because. If anything happens with the other clubs, like I was chatting to somebody on the weekend at church, they're saying, Manchester United and Liverpool will win some titles if City actually get found guilty.
Do you want that title? And
I said, I don't want that.
It can feel weird.
You can't go back in time and celebrate. It's gone. The moment's gone. Everything is gone.
Yeah.
I think there should be repercussions. But come on, why retro do things? No, we're going to sue people. No, man, just give them harsh punishment. That'll be enough.
Relegate them to the National League. Them and Wrexham can fight.
Can fight it out.
They can fight it out there.
Well, Wrexham's not there anymore.
Yeah, the Wrexham were in League 2. They can fight it out down there. We'll sort it out here. But also, those titles would feel weird.
Yeah, no, it would be very weird. And what shirt are you wearing here?
This is Fenerbahce shirt over here. My father-in-law does some business in Turkey.
Okay.
So he was gifted this shirt and he had no need for it.
It's a nice shirt.
It's very nice.
It is actually a very nice shirt.
I was quite stoked. I would never get a shirt like this myself. So I was I'll take it off your hands and
you could end up having one of those walls, with
all the shirts on them.
Podcasters where they've got these all this all these tops from all the different sporting clubs.
I think essentially mine would just be Liverpool with different
red,
names.
Purple, green, black.
Yeah. Just different names, all the players we love. I would do that for sure.
Okay, no, nice. Well, you preached this past Sunday and you preached on God as our provider, which was kind of the conclusion for our Big God series. And Big God was really just trying to get us, our church, looking up at how big God really is rather than looking at how crazy things are in the world, because it's been one of those years. I want to say that the last 3 years, but it's been this year. So there's so much craziness going on in the world that we get caught up looking at ourselves, at survival, all of that. And we just wanted to remind people, God is big. He can do more than what you think he can. And we just need to be reminded of it. So to lift up people's hope and to lift up people's perspective and realization of God. And so you tackled the topic of God as our provider. Now, what is it about God being a provider that actually shows kind of how big he is? Why was that an important one for you? Other than obviously this was on what we talked about, that obviously connected to you though.
Yeah, man, it connected immediately because I think God, firstly it's a huge topic. I think there were many different avenues that you could have taken because even in Scripture we've seen God provide in many different ways. for many different people, and it all took a different shape, or it can take a different shape. So for me, it was about kind of, okay, what do I feel God is maybe saying for us right now in terms of the series that we're in, and focusing on God and really placing our hope and our value in God. That was kind of the thing that landed with me. So in terms of this being a topic that I feel lands, in terms of big God, I think God is the only one that can provide in ways where human experience or human ability lacks. So I kind of started the whole thing by saying, like, have you ever had a moment, or maybe there was a job opportunity, or maybe somebody was very sick and ultimately things came around again. Have you ever had a moment where it just feels, like, how did that even happen?
Yeah.
How did God even provide, or how did life change in this way where everything kind of looked down and out? And I've had a few moments. I feel like my life is a little bit like that moment, because if I look at like the factors of my life and the contributing things, I'm like, geez, for me to land up kind of where I am now, totally by God's grace and ultimately his provision for me and for my future. So I feel we encounter the big God that we speak about in the last two kind of sermons. We encounter a big God because he provides in big miraculous ways. And some of the scriptures, where for man it was impossible, but for God it's possible. For me, I just like, geez, I think that's where we need to shift our focus and our hope and our value onto a God who isn't limited by what limits us. And yes, God will use the things of this world. He'll use physicians, he'll use medication, he'll use different opportunities, and he'll open doors. But ultimately how we see God is he's the one who's opening the doors. He's the one who's putting people in the right places in the right moments. And it's about that trust and that hope. So for me, I was just, very comforted by that. But then with that comes along the journey of trust and trusting in his timing. But the bigness comes in, geez, our God does whatever he wants to do.
Yeah.
And we can trust that.
Okay, because I think one of the things that people would be asking, or always they go, "Oh, God is provider, cool." So he's going to provide for my paycheck. Or he's
totally.
Provide. So there's always, it generally goes straight to a financial thing, because I think that's where we see our biggest need. But in your message, at least when you started, I think, or even in the examples that you used, it wasn't all about financial. Now, in what ways? I think at the financial ones, everybody feels the need and everybody wants provision, because when there's provision financially, we feel secure.
Yeah.
And we need that, obviously. But what are some other areas that you were saying that God actually provides in, that maybe I think we look past?
Well, the examples that I used from scripture were, I think, firstly was in Exodus, where God provides for the Israelites. They had just been led out of Egypt. And then suddenly there's we've got no food. We were better off in captivity. Moses should have left us there, because there we had pots of meat and things were fine, which is such a crazy thought, because you were slaves.
Yeah.
And you were robbed of your religion and your rights and your freedom to do whatever you wanted. You were slaves, but yeah, you had food. Great. So to think that was the thinking, but even in their grumbling and their moaning, God provides for them supernaturally. With manna from sky that would, from the sky that would land on earth, they would eat. And then there was meat, quail in the evenings as well. That was the one example. The other example was that of when the Israelites were being chased, before that actually, being chased by the Egyptians, and were at the Red Sea. And then God kind of opens up the sea in a way that is, I think Moses was saying, God help us. But I don't think in his mind he had envisioned God is going to split the sea open.
Yeah.
And for me, and when it talks about ways, yes, I think it's easy to jump to finance, because I think the other thing there is like control. As soon as you're financially in a decent place, or you feel like you're okay, it feels like you've got that measure of control. But I think God has made a way. And for me, what I wanted to lean in and focus on is trusting that even in seasons where financially you don't feel as in control, you've got a God who makes a way. You've got a God who provides the next step, to have faith to step into that next step. It won't always be the full picture. I think very rarely do we get the full picture, but we've got a God who has been faithful from the beginning of time, and he'll continue to be faithful with giving us the next step, providing a way that's different, that is maybe different for your friend, or it was different for your parents, but for you, when you have that trust and that hope in God, this is what he's faithful to do. He provides that next step. Sometimes it's financial, sometimes it's the job, it's the promotion, and it's awesome and it's amazing. Sometimes it can look different. Sometimes it's restoring a relationship, giving you the wisdom on what to say in a moment, or how to act in a relationship that has been dead for a very long time. It can look so many different ways. And for me, it's like understanding that God provides, and it's more than just a financial control thing. It's actually God steps in and provides moments and ways in all aspects of life, and trusting him for that.
I like what you said about how God provides a way, or makes a way, because in some areas he actually can provide you with friends.
Yeah.
He can I was reading in Jonah, and Jonah he gets chucked over the edge of the boat, and he starts sinking into the sea. And it says that God provided a fish to get. And you think, well, that's by no means is that a blessing. Do I want to get swallowed by a big fish? But God provided a way for him to be rescued. And so I think it's so apt for us to think, okay, it's not just a financial thing, it's that he makes a way in our future. I remember Graham always used to say, like, God's footprints are in your future.
Yeah.
You know, that he has made that way, and he's provided ways for you, friends, opportunities. This is so much bigger than just finances. But finance seems to be the one that we gravitate to.
It is. And I think what's important for, what we think we need might not always be what we need. So you might think you need something. You need something financial, you need a promotion or whatever the deal is, but maybe you just need some good friends. Maybe you just need some, really good community. So you get plugged into a church, you hear a message like you heard on Sunday. For you, it might not be God provide this. It's like, God, put me in a decent life group.
Yeah.
And maybe through the life group, you're going to meet a person. And through that person, there's going to be an opportunity. There's going to be a front door.
Yeah.
So it's being open to the ways in which God can move. And it's not always looking or going the way you thought or, think it should go. God will make a way. So I love what you said, sometimes you need a friend. I think for a lot of people, just, it's through community and through the church, God provides. Through his people, the hands and feet of God.
Exactly.
It's often through people where like a different opportunity or a different moment or something happens. Sometimes it's as easy as, hey, you need something, I'm going to give it to you.
So true.
But through the community and through relationships that we build, that's essentially the hands and feet of God. God doesn't need us, chooses to use us to fulfill the plan, the great plan he has for us. It's like, be open to that.
I like what you said there. It reminds me of this. I don't know if you've heard of this, but this analogy of this guy who's busy drowning, and he's like, "God, save me! If you save me, I'm gonna, I'll serve you." And then this guy comes by on his boat, and he's like, "Hey, just hold on to this." He's like, "No, it's okay. Don't leave me. God's gonna save me." And it's like, oh, flip! Actually, God provides through other vehicles, not just through not just like him divinely intervening in a. In the same way that he did with like maybe Daniel in the lion's den, maybe it's someone else pulls you out of the den. Yeah. And God sent that person. Yeah. So I love that. I love being open to sometimes the normal ways that God does supernatural work.
Yeah, the normal ways. That's good.
And you mentioned something about control, how we try grab for control. Because I think we always have to exercise faith. And when we stop exercising faith, it's probably because we're comfortable or we're discouraged. I think one of the two. But what is it about grabbing for control that almost feels like it's opposite to trusting God for provision for you?
I think the issue is faith with that. So I use a scripture in 1 Timothy 6:17, which says, "Command those who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant, nor to put their hope in wealth, which is so uncertain, but to put their hope in God, who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment." So in terms of control, I think the default for humanity, and again, the wording here is wealth, but you can, anything you put great value on, or anything that you feel, okay, this is the most important thing in my life. I think the default is often, I'm just going to put my hope and my value, and I'm going to invest everything and time and energy into this thing. Because for us, it does appear to be easier to do that with something that is, tangible. You can touch it, you can feel it, you can accumulate it, and then you can look at it and then have a measure of confidence for where you are and where you're at. So I think we've got to fight that as believers, because I think, the enemy is quite happy for us to put all of our hope into something that is temporary. Why? Because the scripture again says it's incredibly uncertain and it shifts and it moves and it changes. And I think the last 3 years are a great example of that things that had great hope. Sometimes it's a person, sometimes it's a job, or it could be anything that gets all your value, but it is uncertain, it's temporary. And it's a counterfeit of where you can put your real hope and your real value, which is in God, who doesn't change, who doesn't shift. So I understand the issue of control, and there have been seasons of my life where I've loved control. I personally don't love things shifting and changing all the time, but the reality is that the last 3 years has reminded humanity that things shift and change all the time. It should give us a greater level of confidence to say, okay, well, let me then try to put my hope in God, who doesn't change. And these other things that he brings and also takes away according to his will, which we know is going to have the best outcome for us, I can trust that and not be so distraught or broken or like kind of left on my knees when something comes It becomes your everything, and then it goes, and then you feel like you lack purpose and you lack calling, where your purpose and the calling always rested with God. So this issue of control, I think it's a matter of faith. It doesn't take much faith to trust in something you see and can accumulate and grow and mold yourself.
Yes.
It takes a lot of faith to trust in a God who's bigger, his ways are bigger, his thoughts are higher. Trust in his plan for your life and to bring things in and to take things away at different times. That takes faith. And that's a challenge, and I think a lot of us will continue to grow in this area. It's not about being perfect at that from day one, but if we start with the revelation of, our God is, firstly, he's big and he's able, but he's also incredibly loving and caring and knows the hairs on your head and knows your future. He knows all those things, and he wants you to step into the great calling that he has for your life, to trust him with that. So then relinquishing control over things that are temporary and saying, God, you know what, I'm going to hand it over to you. And if things look different to my 5-year or my 10-year or my 20-year plan, you're at work.
Yeah.
So help me to understand that. And maybe the better prayer in the morning is, God, help me. I heard somebody say, stop praying for God to bless what you're doing. Start praying that you'll do what God's already blessing.
Yes.
And I think that's maybe a healthier outlook to have.
For sure.
Challenging, for sure, challenging, because it goes against the default for humanity. But that's kind of where we want to maybe land, is like, can I get better at that?
Well, do you think that, I mean, at the time of this recording, we're 3 years out of a global pandemic.
Yeah.
We've had 2 pretty serious wars that have affected the globe. We've had inflation that has hit, I think, most countries around the world. And there's been political crisis in other places. Now, with all these things going on, do you think that, and of course this is a generalization, but do you think people are leaning into trying to grab more control? Or do you think people are realizing, okay, let's lean more into God? Where do you think the majority of, let's not even say the world, let's just say the majority of believers, where do you think they would be leaning?
Candidly speaking, I think people are trusting more in themselves. I think we see that. I mean, I work for a church, and we look at things like attendance, and we look at how often we see people. And again, attendance does not make you a Christian as much as living in a garage makes you a car, but good indicators of maybe where people are at. It looks to me that a lot of people are trying to find more control in the midst of a world that looks completely out of control, because you want that level of, you want to call it confidence or something, where it feels like, okay, no, it's all right.
Security.
The world is security is a good word. The world is in flames, but my little world is okay. We've got our stuff, and we protect ourselves, and we protect our time, and we protect the things that we're getting involved in. I think I heard a stat about volunteerism is like globally, I'd be lying if I said the numbers, but globally down. People just volunteer, give of themselves.
It was 25% down or something, 25 or 35% down.
So it's like it seems that the world is getting, maybe less generous, more selfish in terms of just outlook. So I'm not saying that's all the time it's bad, and definitely not, because I think it's situational. But I personally, from my point of view, I think that we have to fight that. We have to fight that personally, of going, okay, I want to withdraw. I want to make sure I'm okay. I want to make sure it's like to continue remain looking out to what God is doing, because God wants to, like we said in the beginning, God wants to, yes, use you for your own life, but also use you to impact the lives of other people. And if it stays quite small and inward looking, you kind of cut off that ability to be impactful for the people around you. And again, it could be just your neighbor, or it could be many more people. But I don't know how you feel about it, but personally, when I look out, it does look like, not everybody, but it does look like there is a sense of, I don't know, it could be fear. Could be fear, but where people are almost maybe taking a step back in terms of, geez, the world is crazy. Let me make sure my world isn't crazy. Yeah,
I would agree from the outlook. And again, it's not the same for every person in every situation.
It's not.
And I think many of us have gone into that mode of as one guy used this phrase of not self-protection, but like taking care of self, going to self-preservation mode. And we have to stretch again to be a generous member of the community, of a sense of, hey, God is actually able. God has seen you through, and we know from scripture all these things are going to happen, so we're not supposed to lose our minds while other people are. We're supposed to go in rather than step back.
Yeah.
So I think there's like the academic, this is how we should do it, but where do you think the confidence comes in? And I don't think this is in your notes, but where do you think the confidence comes in for people to go, I actually need to stop putting my confidence, maybe it is a bit, in what the world has to offer. And the world's got a lot of great things. I mean, there's a lot of good things, friendships and beautiful places and, a lot of great things to put. I mean, we sit on chairs, we're confident. Like, there's good things to put confidence in, but I think it's our ultimate confidence. How do we get people, or even us ourselves, go, well, how do I get my confidence off what I see and onto God, who in all intents and purposes, I can't see?
Yeah. I think like you're saying, I think what's easy is to build confidence in something that you see and know and are familiar with. I think the balance there is, are we growing familiar with God through his word? Are we actually learning about God, learning about Jesus, his ways, how he responded to situations when he was on earth, how he handled things, his teachings, and then later on the responses of the early church to the knowledge of Jesus, to those who were with him, and then to those who wrote about him, and how they learned and grew from that. Because ultimately, I think it would be unreasonable for us to say, hey, put all your faith and confidence in God. You don't know much about him. You don't quite know how he's going to react, or you don't quite get it, but just trust us. Yeah. That would be unreasonable. But in the Bible, God has given us everything we need for faith and salvation. And I find that the more I read scripture, the more I grow familiar with God and with Jesus and how he responded. It's easier to put my confidence in a God who really did everything out of love and did everything to rescue a people that, quite frankly, turned their backs on him. A God that loved us first.
Yeah.
So you can begin to trust that this God is not doing it for any kind of personal gain. He's kind of doing it all because he loves the humanity. He loves the creation that he made.
Yes.
And he's constantly pursuing us. And for me, it's like, geez, with that knowledge, okay, it's quite easy for me to put my trust and my confidence in that. Although it's also easy to trust in something that I see and feel.
Yes.
I think if people aren't taking the time to grow familiar with God, ultimately through his word, but also through prayer and experience, it's quite difficult. I would agree. I would say it's very difficult to put your trust in God if you're not maybe growing in those areas.
Yeah. And I think it comes down to the point of, you've got to know God, which I 100% agree with, because through his word, he communicates his character, he communicates what he's done. There's a lot of track record. There's the goodness of his character. So, but I think you also have to step out of yourself.
Yeah.
And do something and realize for yourself that he is actually like that for you as well.
Sure.
Like, to use an oversimplified analogy of the chair, of going, cool, the chair looks strong. I can read the rating. The rating says it can hold my weight. But until I sit on it, am I really confident that the chair is going to...
Yeah.
So I think that's a very... we've got to actually activate faith, because otherwise, I was reading in James. And James, if you want to get a reality check, James is where you go.
Yeah.
And he goes, don't tell me you have faith until you've acted on it.
Yeah.
And I think that's where we have to go.
But we build confidence in those moments.
Yeah.
So I think even an example now, and again, it's actually giving.
Yes.
So I've heard so many stories through our Grow course of people that are even new or have been a part of giving before to God. They said they can't explain it. As soon as they stepped out in faith and the budget was tight.
Yeah.
So giving for them would have been a faith exercise and a faith step. And when they did it, just seeing God come through for them in those ways, it totally blew their mind. And it was the experience that really ticked them over. It wasn't a great sermon,
yes,
or the teaching, or even really, you can read the scripture the first time and be like, hey, that's good. I believe that's true. But it's in the experience where things become alive and real. So, and then when I hear those stories, I'm like, flip, that's encouraging, man. That's super inspiring. And there's been 3 or 4 stories. People said, hey, can I just share this? And when we started giving, this is how things were, and God came through supernaturally. I've heard a story recently of someone who what they were going to give was a large part of their petrol budget, and they usually filled their tank, they said 2.5 times a month, and they filled the tank once, and they never had to put petrol in again that month.
Come on.
And it's like, okay, cool, Phil. But this person was so it was so weird that he went to go check the car out because he thought his petrol, whatever the dinghy thing is that moves up and down, they thought it was broken. Because it's like, I've filled my car once, I've driven for 2 weeks, it's barely moved, and there's nothing wrong with it. You obviously it was more recent than 2 weeks ago you put petrol in. And for him, it was just, that's like a fun story and it brings a smile, but like, that's what God does.
Yes.
That is just what God does, and it's different, and it looks different, and it might be different for you. But I love what you said, that in the experience is where you build confidence.
Yes.
And it's like, geez, when I've seen God provide for me in my life in various different ways, I'm like, this is the God that came through for me when I was 16.
Yeah.
It's the God who came through for me when I was 19. It was the God who came through for me when I was 23. Odds are it's looking pretty good that he's going to continue to come through for me, even when I don't understand it, and even when it looks different. And maybe I'm even struggling or going through a tough moment. It's just consistent with his character, and it's so consistent with my experience. So I think you're 100% right there. It's like give God a chance to come through for you.
Yeah.
Like I get, like it's easy to sit on the box and to.
Oh, you're gonna preach now?
No, but it's easy to get on the box. Whatever you said, I'm like, come on, let's go. It's easy to be like, I don't know. It's like, well, just give him opportunity.
Yeah.
It's like do something where you step out a little bit and be like, okay, well, you know what? And we don't want to test God, but I mean, give him an opportunity to trust him with your family, trust him with your finances, trust him with these things. At least give him the opportunity. And if it falls flat, then that can be your decision made. But we've just seen God come through when we've given him those moments and those opportunities to do it. It's like, can we learn from that and put ourselves in positions where it's slightly uncomfortable, but if somebody's going to come through now, it's God.
Yeah, God is so attracted to faith and humility.
Yeah,
it's like wild. If you would live by faith and in humility, God is so attracted. Like he moves towards that. Yeah. And I love hearing stories, especially when you give that sort of when people start tithing, I think is what you're referring to. And when they're giving. And they give like that first one, and I remember the first time I gave it was difficult. Like, it's hard. It's hard to let that money go because you're like, I needed that money.
Yeah.
And then
that money had a place.
It had a name.
It had an account. Like that had to go somewhere.
Exactly, Gucci.
Yeah.
And it was good, and it's gone. But then when you see God comes through, and you get this testimony and the story, and it's like all of a sudden you come alive. And I think you get to this place where you've been doing this for years, so it doesn't have the same reaction, but God still takes care of you, and you're still walking in the blessing of what he'd done for you in the past and continues to do. So, but for you, I'd love to, is there any story that in your personal life of God's provision that still has sort of that, when you think about, hey, God provides, that's what you go to?
I think for me, financially, I think God has always looked after myself and Jean-Marie. Like he has provided in those ways. But for me, I don't think that's my story quite. I think my story has been God has always provided people at the right time in my life. I think I needed that.
I love that.
My personality and I think where I was going, I needed strong people at the right time. And God is so faithful that at different stages, where I needed someone heavy-handed, God provided that. When I needed someone who could guide and teach and lead and have grace, I got that. When I needed something different, more like a peer or somebody to do life with, I got that. And I think it takes time often to see that.
Yes.
Because sometimes you can just take that type of thing for granted. It's just a person, it's just a friend, it's just a mentor, it's just a boss. It's just an employee that I connect with, and it's great. I think it's very easy to do that. But I think if you take even just like 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and you think about your life and the moments where things maybe shifted and changed, not even overnight, but just those seasons, it's very obvious to me, like painfully obvious, that God put people in my life at the right moments that really almost steered, just changed trajectory by a couple degrees and just steered me to where I can be today. I honestly can't take any sort of credit for that. It's just, I think my story is categorized by God providing the right people and the right leaders in my life.
Yes.
In different capacities.
Yes.
I don't even want to think about my life without these 3 or 4 people. I don't even want to think about where I'd be. Just in a very different place with a very underdeveloped character. I think that's for me. I don't know if there's something for you.
Yeah, for me, I think when I look back, I love it that it's a different kind of story that you've got, because your story is how God provided in circumstances and provided with people. And if I look back, I probably see, I can see some of that. But for me, it would be supernatural miracle provision of finances. Not just finances, but I mean, when my wife and I, when Lara and I, we were married, I was earning as low as you could possibly earn. My dad had a flat that he rented out to us for less, I think it was half the price.
Jeez.
And Lara was studying her masters and her masters, honors and masters. And she would cook and she would pray over the food, and the food would just never finish. We didn't have money. Like, honestly, when I say we were eating rice mixed with tomato sauce,
come on,
I'm not even joking, and it would just always be enough.
Sure.
Because she was worried about it. Other times we sold a car, and then other times we were given a car. We've always given. We've always tithed. We've always tried to be over and above generous. Like, when we give, we don't give 10%. We give more than than that, because that's our conviction.
Yeah.
Because we know, like, and so when we look back at and it's not just been one of those. I mean, there's been countless of those. And when we look back, I go, God is always providing. So I'm not worried about the future necessarily. Even if I have to take what looks like a backward step to other people, for me, I know it's not a backward step.
Yeah.
I know that there's a reason for this step. So I'm very, very chilled about it. But yeah, no, there's been things like that. I think our clutch broke, and in the car didn't have money to fix it. Somebody said, "Hey, I'd love to pay for your clutch."
What?
I think recently someone's like, "Hey, I just want to give you money." Like that's happened periodically through time.
Sure.
And often when we give, especially when it comes, like, we got a miracle offering coming up.
Yeah.
And this is not a plug for the miracle offering, but it's always a test of, do we give or don't we give?
Yeah.
And so we always, it's not about if we do or don't, it's like how much. And we always try to go to as uncomfortable as we can get.
Wow.
And give at that point, because you have to stretch your faith every time. And we've just seen God move so many times. It's like, okay, let's do it. And even, it's always a test. It's always like, oh, do we, don't we, how much, all that stuff. But you know, I think when you get to see God move in provision, you're like, okay, cool, let's just keep going.
Jeez.
And trusting. I've struggled to trust more for other people for provision than I do for myself.
Really? So for you, it's chilled?
Yeah, so I'll believe God for provision for Lara, me, and stuff. But when it comes for other people, I always want to give them the safe option rather than say, trust God. God's going to come through. I know that He will.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to be with you.
It's hard. You don't want to take responsibility
at midnight.
Yeah.
When you're freaking out.
Debit orders need to come off. And
yeah. So, but it's one of the. But I want to end up on one last thing. We've got. You chatted about this amazing story of Abraham and Isaac, and how Abraham took his 10-year-old son at the time, I think he was 10, and told him to go sacrifice him on the top of the mountain to test Abraham's faith or loyalty. And when I was listening to that, I was reading that, and that's a crazy story. And he actually didn't end up sacrificing Isaac because God detests child sacrifice. So Correct. Obviously that's not he's going to. But Abraham had the confidence that if his son had to die, God would raise him up from the dead.
Yeah.
And then you showed how God did provide a ram in the thicket. And obviously that's a foreshadowing of Jesus and all that stuff. And that's amazing. And went on to how the greatest provision God has for us is salvation. But like 10 years before, a couple of years before that, Abraham actually tried to do it his own way.
He did.
Because he was holding on to a promise for years. The promise wasn't coming.
Yeah.
So he was like, okay, well, if God's not going to provide supernaturally, maybe what we need to do is
do it ourselves.
And there came Ishmael. And loved by God, loved by Abraham, but wasn't the child of the promise. Isaac was the child of the promise. Now, I would love to, because that's produced through human effort and not through trust. And I think that's where it comes down to control.
Yeah.
I'm going to control through making an Ishmael rather than trusting and waiting and relying on God. How do you think, because I know this was in your notes, but I wanted to pick your brain about it. How do you think we can avoid birthing Ishmaels, which is birthing things through purely human effort? Obviously, we're not talking about normal stuff. We're talking about a promise from God, a promise of provision. how do we keep from birthing it ourselves in human effort, and then, like you also said, having to sustain it? Because if you birth it, you sustain it. Or if God brings the promise, then he's the one who's going to sustain it. How do you think we can avoid more Ishmaels, not the person, the idea, and have more Isaacs? Because I think he was probably tested with Isaac because of what he did with Ishmael.
Yeah.
That's my
okay.
That's my assumption or my own thinking around the topic.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I think I love that. I love the fact that we'll do this, all of us in our lives. There will be a promise, or be something we're sensing from God, or something that we greatly desire. Maybe we feel like it's coming, but when it's not quite, your timing or your way, we'll try to do it ourselves. And then it came down to something that I mentioned in the sermon. There were two things. So the one thing is being faithful with what's in your hand right now. I don't think that everything that you've got right now, your job, your family, the different things that God has already provided. I think God is wanting us to do our very best with those things, to be incredibly diligent, to work incredibly hard. Colossians says, whatever your hand finds to do today, do it to the glory of God. So in Abram's case, before Isaac came, and then there was the Ishmael situation, in that moment, God was calling him to be diligent and patiently wait and trust. And in that season, it's incredibly difficult to do. And we could find ourselves in a similar moment. Let's take a promotion, for example. We really want this promotion. We're the right guy. All the wrong people are getting promoted. And we want to force the hand, but you don't feel like God is calling you to quit. But maybe you're just like, you know what? I'm entitled to this better job, or to this. I'm going to quit. I'm going to leave. I'm going to go to somewhere else. And you step out of where God wanted you to go. I think it's trying to stay close to God, in a sense of like, God, give me a peace, or make me incredibly uncomfortable with a decision or with a movement. So if God has asked you to do something, so instead of just birthing an Ishmael, inverted commas, because you're growing, this is what I want to do. This is what the world says I need to do. This is what my 5-year plan says I need to do.
Yeah.
This is what my family are telling me I should do.
By now I should be at.
I'm gonna let me just Ishmael. Like, let me just do this thing. yeah. Not really birthing, but pushing. I'm just gonna get this thing out. So instead of that, it's like, what a great prayer is, like, God, would you give me, if you're wanting me to stay in this job, would you give me a peace here? Or if you're wanting me to move, would you make it painfully clear? Would you make me uncomfortable in my belly? Would you make it so clear? And at least give God a chance to steer the ship.
Good. Wow.
Instead of I'm taking it into my own hands. I'm going to do this my way. Take time. And you know what? God will also use people in this situation as well. Like, that's why it's so good to have guys like life group leaders, or people in your life that can offer wisdom and counsel. The Bible constantly talks about seeking counsel and seeking wisdom from other people, and exchanging ideas and getting other people to pray for you. And I think that way we can take the time to allow God to say, you know what, I'm actually wanting you to stay, or I'm actually wanting you to go, whatever it may be, in whatever situation. Because then the other thing is, and also what I mentioned, is that so like, you've got something now that you've birthed or that you've started, and this is your thing now. You value it, and you're putting all your investment into it. Now you have to become everything to that thing. You have to work longer. So if it's a job, you have to work longer to keep it. You have to skip things that are very important. It drains the life out of you. You don't know why. You're never feeling refreshed, or you're never feeling like, oh, I just feel just the blessing of God on this thing, or the favor of God on this thing, because this is your thing.
Yeah.
You've birthed it out of your own power, out of your own control, out of your own impatience. Keep it alive. And I don't think that humanity or mankind was ever created to sustain something in that way. God in Isaiah, it says that God will sustain you till your hairs are gray. He'll be the one that sustains and maintains and rescues you in every moment. I would rather that dynamic. I'd rather have my value and trust in God, who promises to sustain me, than birth a bunch of things out of me just not trusting the timing of God and having to sustain those things. Good. So I would boil it all down. I'd boil it all down to just taking more. I would say just take a bit more time before you're going to go into a big decision or change something. Take a bit more time. Seek God. Pray. Chat to people that also love God and are leaders, and people that you trust in your life. instead of just going ahead and birthing the Ishmael and doing something out of impatience, it's like, can we just take a moment? Maybe God is calling me to a season of just learning a few lessons, taking time, developing character in a moment that isn't quite ideal, but God could be doing something different through that. I don't know if that answers.
No, I think it's very good. I think it's going to be very, very helpful. We're going to close after this. There is someone out there listening to this, watching this, and going, hey, I want to trust God to be my provider. I'm going to take the trust off myself or the confidence off my ability, the economy, the whatever, and I'm going to put it on God. How would you encourage them to go, like, that's a good move?
Yeah, I think it's a great move, and I think you're going to put a lot of pressure on yourself to try to do everything at once. I think to take baby steps towards trust is the right way to do it. And how you do that is if you look at the different areas of your life that you value, that you care about, that you feel a lot of responsibility for. It could be your job, it could be your family. It's identifying ways that we can begin to relinquish control and begin to hand things over to God. So if you let's take your kids, for example, and this could be tough. But are your kids and is your family in an environment where they're experiencing God and knowing God? Are you growing in your understanding that, God is He's ultimately going to provide and care for your family and for your kids. And when they go to school and you no longer can maybe regulate the conversations and instead of letting that be something that totally just destroys you and makes you fearful and scared, it's like, you know what, I trust my children. I trust that God and the Holy Spirit is leading and guiding my kids and their friends and their conversations. And taking short steps like that, looking at the areas of your life in which you think maybe there's a control issue. It's like, I don't know if I quite trust God in the area of my finances or in the area of my family, to take small steps. I mean, if for finances, for example, when we do our Grow course, and people would love to, they'd love to get into the habit of giving, and they want to grow in their giving because they know it's potentially something that, this could actually be something that leads me away from God. There's a challenge, like it might not be, so the tithe is 10%, it might not be 10% to start. Why don't you start with 1%? And just give God the window, give God the opportunity to fill the gap, to provide for the gap. Again, I think it's more about the heart than it is the actual thing. So if the heart is saying, God, I want to give you, I want to hand it over to you. I want you to be the one that's in control. I want you to be the one that I can trust my family to, my finances to, my relationships to. Taking small steps in those different areas, I think is the way to go.
Yeah, good.
I don't know if that's practical enough.
Yeah, I think it's giving people...
It's more just an idea.
Steps towards it. I think what I got out of it is start transferring the weight of it over to God. Through steps and process, and I think that's all helpful.
I think even just the knowledge that you can hand things over to God, and He can be the one that takes the weight. My burden is light, my yoke is easy. It's like, I don't think a lot of people live that way, and I think that is a lot of the things that we feel responsible for, and you are responsible for to an extent, and it's heavy, and it's like burdensome, and it's hard to carry, and sometimes that takes you further away from God and church and peace and joy and fruit of the Spirit, where God is saying, you know what, if you'd give it to me, my burden's a lot lighter, and my yoke is easy. You could live that way, and it's not a case of just not caring or not working. I think it's just am I going to put my hope in God or my hope in my ability to get the job done?
Yeah, no, it's right.
Or to the other side.
Yeah, and I mean, I would say that when we do life God's way, we reap God's blessings.
Yeah.
And so if you want to live in the blessings of God, don't do it your way, do it His way.
Yeah.
And He is a provider. He does provide. So when you trust Him to provide, He will provide. It's not like, He doesn't play science experiments with different kids. He's like, that's who I am. He's not going to deny who He is. 100%. He is that. So thanks for the helpful conversation.
Yeah, it was awesome.
We'll close out there. God is our provider in our Big God series. And we'd love to hear from anybody that's listening, watching this.
Maybe there's a story or two.
Share something.
People that have experienced God's provision in any way. It could be financial, it could be through a relationship, it could be restoration in an area. Maybe you were sick, God provided. We'd love to, those stories just stir us.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we'll stir the other listeners that read the comments.
Absolutely. And if this has helped you, like, share, subscribe.
Yeah.
And thanks so much for tuning in.
Awesome. See you soon.